Welcome to Live Free Legal. If you're joining us live or watching the replay, I want to say this clearly right out of the gate. If the holidays feel heavy this year, it's not because you're weak. It's because abuse does not stop for Christmas. For many women coming out of abusive relationships, the holidays are not always joyful. They're emotionally triggering, they can be lonely, and they're financially stressful. They involve unpredictable exes, high conflict custody schedules, manipulation, and the grief of losing traditions or even entire family systems. Today's conversation is for women navigating holiday abuse, post-separation abuse, and financial abuse in December, and the emotional toll of trying to hold everything together when things are not perfect. I'm Tiffany Lesnik, a domestic violence attorney, legal coach, and survivor. And today I'm joined by someone who understands the cost of survival deeply. I'm honored to welcome Lisa Meister. Lisa is an author, speaker, and host of the podcast. And I'm going to let her talk about her podcast. She speaks powerfully about healing, not only from abusive relationships, but from entire abusive systems, which is not something all survivors have to endure, especially during the holidays. So Lisa, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be on your podcast. I love the work you're doing and how many women that you are impacting and helping them through this difficult time.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate that. Can you tell us a little bit about your podcast and how women can get to know you and check you out?
My podcast is called Only God Rescued Me. I am personally a survivor of ritual abuse, and I have on survivors who have gone through ritual abuse. I'm sorry, I'm hearing an echo, so I'm a little bit lost here. But we also talk about how God comes in and can rescue everybody from their story, no matter what you've been through. Whether it's domestic abuse, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's ritual abuse, God comes in amazing ways, and he rescues all of us. When God came to Moses in the burning bush, he said, "My name is Yahweh. I am that I am. I save that I save." And that's what he does. He saves all of us over and over again. And so whatever you're going through this holiday season, he's going to come in and he's going to rescue you in whatever you are experiencing. And that's what I love, that we're not alone in what we're facing this season.
Absolutely. And Lisa, you said that you were a survivor as well. Before we dive into questions, can you share what the holidays felt like for you during the early stages of leaving abuse, and why they may have been especially triggering for you?
And I had repressed memories of abuse from my family. So when I went to talk to my family saying, "Hey, I remember what happened," my family said, "How dare you?" and kicked me out. But not just my parents, my brothers, but all my grandparents, all my aunts, uncles, and cousins. I lost everybody. So it was an exit of a very large family. It was very hard, very triggering. And so holidays used to be having a very large family. It was about aunts, uncles, and cousins. And it was all about the love of family. Family was everything. So all of a sudden, I was all alone. It was like being an orphan. And that was very triggering. It was very painful. And I wasn't sure how to deal with that. And so you sit around a Christmas tree and you feel very isolated. And you go to church and everybody's there with their large family. And you're sitting there with, wait a minute, I think I'm supposed to be the victim, but why do I feel like the bad person here? And it's very confusing. It's very triggering. And it takes a very long time to work through it.
Right. Yes. Thank you for sharing that, Lisa. And I think a lot of us, when we think about leaving an abusive relationship, we think about just leaving an abusive spouse. But unfortunately, many women do experience having an entire abusive family system, right? They may come from abuse themselves, where they had abusive parents, abusive family members. They may be experiencing abuse within their own church. They may be experiencing abuse within their community. And so when they leave an abusive relationship, it's not just one person that they're leaving, right? They're leaving an entire community in some cases, and we don't always think about that. And it sounds like that was your experience.
It was. And it's hard to decide, do I stand by my story and what happened to me, or do I go back to the family? And it's a very difficult choice. I know this happened. I know it's true because I validated my story. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to stand by that? Or do I want my family, which my heart is saying, I want my family? And it's a really, really hard choice to make.
Right, right. So what were some of the traditions, other than having family around, what were some of the traditions that you had to let go of that you regretted or missed the most?
Well, we would go to my husband's family, then we would go to my family, and then we would have our own Christmas. And it didn't, you'd make the rounds. So that was out. And so my kids wanted to know, well, where's grandma and grandpa? And how to explain that to my kids in a way that they would understand. It's like, well, grandma and grandpa hurt me. And then so my daughter would say, well, can we put mommy in the closet and then we can have grandpa and grandma here? And that's a little cringeworthy, because like, okay, now mom's the problem. And how, you can't explain that to a 5-year-old. So Christmas has changed. We're taking a whole family out of the equation that used to be there. So there's a hole. And their presents are now gone that my kids expect. Because immediately that first Christmas came, there was no presents from that side of the family. And they don't understand that at all. I didn't know what to do about that. I didn't know how to explain that. There's holes that you cannot fill.
Mm-hmm.
There's things you cannot explain to little kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kids are saying that it's my problem. I didn't know what to say.
Right, right. And I think abusers thrive on creating chaos and confusion, right? So they'd like to do things that are very theatrical in nature. So, okay, we're just going to cut you out, or there are not going to be any gifts for the children. And they create a dramatic or chaotic situation where it leaves you in a position where you have to explain something that's very difficult for the children. And I think my advice to women in a situation like that is don't gameplay, don't become a part of the chaos and confusion for the children, right? Don't make a big deal about the fact that there aren't any gifts from that side of the family, right? Just downplay it and say, that's okay. It's okay that there's no gifts this year. Christmas isn't about gift giving, or it's not about gifts, right? It's about being together. It's about, the birth of Jesus, and just don't gloss over it and then move on from there. It's as hard as it is for us. And I think for women, especially when we're going through the trauma and the heartbreak of those initial holidays alone, or with the holidays changing and then having to protect our children through that, it's really hard to put on that front for them to protect them. But I do think not getting involved and saying, well, your grandparents, they're doing a bad thing, they should not have done that, and then involving the children in that conflict is not good for them. So I would say just don't don't get involved in the game playing that they're in, the chaos and the confusion that they're going to try to create. Gloss over it and move on. That would be kind of my suggestion there. And it creates less emotional turmoil for you as well as the victim or the survivor, because if you get involved in their shenanigans, right, it's so emotionally exhausting for you, because once they suck you in to that game playing, right, then you're in, and it's the emotional energy time that's involved in that. It's not going to be worth it for you or your children. So I want to talk about some new traditions. And by the way, one thing I do want to mention, you had talked about going to the in-laws house. For some of you out there, one of the best parts of leaving an abusive relationship is never having to go to your in-laws again, right? That might actually be a positive. Not having to do that back and forth, that stressful, we got to pack everybody up. We got to pack the kids up. We got to go here and there and everywhere, right? That actually might be the peacefulness of being able just to be home with your children and not having to make all of those transitions can be a positive new tradition for you. And maybe you don't like your in-laws so much. Maybe they are abusive, or they're very difficult, or they're very demanding. So that could be a benefit to leaving an abusive dynamic, would be not having to go to the in-laws or a family system that has been dysfunctional or toxic. What do you think to that, Lisa?
Absolutely. We've started looking at my husband's family, which was domestic abuse. And so over the last few years, stopped having them over because they always blew up the holidays. And my kids weren't happy about that decision. And so we've navigated that over the last couple years. But focusing on my kids has turned out to be a positive. And we are much healthier.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to actually skip to that section of our discussion. I do want to talk about that, because I think children really appreciate experiences during Christmas, and they appreciate safety during the holidays, right? Holidays tend to be a time when abusive personalities come on the strongest. That's when there's a lot of blow-ups, right? There's a lot of arguing. There's a lot of name calling. There's a lot of instability. I remember a time, I'll just share a story. I remember a time that my ex-husband was infuriated by the fact that I was boiling an egg the wrong way. And such a dumb thing. And of course, there are always these dumb things, and it ruined the entire day because I was boiling an egg the wrong way. And the kids were crying, and he was yelling, and the gift wrapping was over, and it just created such a downer for the whole day. And the peace that I think my children desired, right? Rather than waking up on Christmas morning and being on pins and needles and experiencing that tension that everyone feels, right? When is he about to blow, or when are they about to blow? The children having that safety, right? And knowing like, I'm safe here. I don't have to worry about my protective parent or my safe parent blowing up on me. I think that is more valuable to them than being in an abusive environment where they're lavished with presents. And you having that protective environment with them, being away from an abusive family system or an abusive parent, to be able to provide that type of environment for them is so much more meaningful during the holidays than any amount of gifts. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. There's something in our mind that thinks we have to give them family, and we'll put up with so much to keep that ideal going without understanding how much damage that it does to our kids, because that's what keeps abuse going through the generations because that's what they continue to see. But if we can get them out of that cycle, that's what gives them the understanding of what peace is. And if we can give peace to our kids, isn't that the biggest gift that we could ever give them? That's the true gift of Christmas, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And I tell my clients all the time as an attorney, right, when we're negotiating even financial things, you can't put a price on freedom, right? And with freedom comes peace, right? So sometimes we got to let go of some of the dollars in order to obtain that freedom or that peace. And I think for children in particular, that is so important. And I do have a video that I would encourage everyone to watch. I'll put the link in the link's already in the description box, but it's how to create like peaceful, fun experiences for you and your children during the holidays that they are going to remember. And I think that's another thing to keep in mind is that they're not going to remember that gift. You know, the stack of presents that they get each year, they're not going to remember what those were 10 years from now, but they are going to remember those experiences that they had with you. Do you have any particular experiences or traditions that you started with your children that you'd want to share with us?
I'm trying to be creative and being present and fun with them. Like this year, we did our Christmas this past Sunday. So I created the 12 Days of Christmas, where I gave everybody a note card with a number on it, and they got to create their own day of Christmas. And then instead of my true love gave to me, I called it my two grandsons' days. So my name gave to me. And one of my daughters has a bird named Mango. And so the first day, a mango in a pear tree. So my kids started kind of mumbling about it, like, oh, this is stupid. But as we started singing through it, and everybody had to sing out their day, they started laughing hysterically. And they had so much fun. And by the time we got done, they said, Mom, would you save this so we can sing this every year? So we created a memory, and this is something we can do year after year. It cost me nothing.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I do is we do a white elephant Christmas Eve. You know, it's one gift, and it can be a silly gift. And I know for some people they can't afford any gifts at all. But even for a white elephant, it could be something that you make, right? And that is something that my children look forward to every single year. If we do not do white elephant on Christmas Eve, like their holiday is just ruined. And so that's one new tradition that I created. And there are plenty of other things that you guys could do. Some examples would be to do like a pajama day or a pajama night where you guys just get together and you watch a Christmas movie and drink hot chocolate and do popcorn. You could let your children choose an activity, like let them choose something that's meaningful to them that they want to do. And if they want to do that every year, you know, you do that every year. One of the things I had suggested in the video about financial abuse during the holidays is really prolonging Christmas through an experience, for example, a scavenger hunt. So you take something, whether it's gifts or you have little love note cards, like cards that tell your children how special they are, all the wonderful qualities and things about your kids that you love about them and how proud you are of them. Because that's not something abused children get to hear a lot about, right? They're constantly put down and told that they're not affirmed by the abusive parent. So to have little cards that tell them how smart and how special and how valued and how loved they are and all of their giftedness, to find those little cards all around the house, what a treasure that would be for them. You know, so to have like a little scavenger hunt where they can find all these special notes about them. And whether you do that like Lisa did over like 12 days, which sounds so much fun, you know, or something. So create experiences. Go look at Christmas lights. I remember as a kid, My dad would take us in his car and we would drive all around the area that I live in and look at all the Christmas lights. And that was one of my favorite memories as a child. Cost nothing except some gas. And of course, you have to have a car to do that. But if you don't have a car and you don't have money for gas, take a walk around the neighborhood together. Dress up, scarves, gloves, and walk around the neighborhood and look at the lights. Any other ideas come to mind, Lisa, for affordable ways that you can celebrate Christmas with your children that would be meaningful?
Another fun one we've done when they're teens or older is, if money wasn't an object, what would you give to each other? And they really get creative with that and laugh. They come up with crazy off the wall things and they laugh, and it's so much fun, and you don't have to give anything. It doesn't cost a cent.
Yeah, no, exactly. Another thing would be, teaching your children the value of giving back, right? Giving of yourself, service, showing them what love really looks like. And so maybe volunteering with them, taking them to a food bank, or taking them to serve a meal to underprivileged folks, or to a toy drive or something like that, having them serve with you as a family. That might be something you could do each year. Traditions don't have to be super expensive or loud or chaotic, right? They have to be safe, just like Lisa said. That's so important for children. So, Lisa, I want to talk about, and I don't know if you had this experience as much, but I know a lot of women experience financial abuse during the holidays, right? So they rely on child support or they rely on spousal support in order to be able to pay their bills, in order to provide gifts for their children. And of course, the abuser can't afford to pay support that month. There's a routing issue with the bank. He's losing his job. There's something happening and support is not paid on time, or support is not paid at all, or it comes late. And so I don't know if you've had any direct experience with that kind of manipulation at the holidays, or even if financial instability was an issue for you at a particular time in your healing journey. I don't know if you can talk about that at all.
I know, not personally with me, but I know a lot of women who have. I have a community of survivors that I have. And so there are other options. Are you saying options to how to handle the holidays? I'm sorry, there's an echo, so I'm having trouble.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that echo. Did you ever experience difficulties with finances during the holidays? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yeah, not personally.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I do know, and both of us work with a lot of victims of domestic violence, and certainly financial struggles are a huge concern to many women going through domestic abuse. So I'm going to put in the chat box, if you need holiday gift help, you can email me at livefreelegal@gmail.com, and I will email you my list of free and affordable resources for moms on how to acquire some funding or some gifts for your children over the holidays. And it's also in the description in this live in the YouTube link below. So you can just go directly to the description below and get those links in order to get free resources or affordable resources to get gifts for your children. But one of the things, if you have a court order in place and you are provided with child support or spousal support, let's say, and it's court ordered, right? It's required. Make sure that you're documenting what he is not paying. So, and if it's late, because if that becomes a consistent pattern, or if he's doing that every holiday, if he's doing that every December, that may be something where you want to set some boundaries and think about potentially filing for contempt in January or in February, especially if that's consistent, and enforce some boundaries with him, because that is very important to do, because the more boundaries you set with him and the more you enforce a court order, the less likely he's going to want to push, right? If he knows he can't get away with it, then he's not going to keep forcing that issue. But if he can continue to get away with things, then he's going to continue to try to push. And we talked a little bit before we started here today about boundaries. How important is it once you leave an abusive relationship, maybe to set some boundaries with your abusive family system or your abusive spouse during the holidays in order to reduce conflict?
It is so hard to set boundaries, whether it's a spouse or whether it's a family. You weren't allowed to have them. And so when you start to set them, it's going to feel wrong. But you need to do that. So whether it's getting a divorce or whether it's stepping away from your family, that's a good boundary that you've set. But when it comes to the holidays, it gets really confusing because your kids are going to want more. And then whether you keep that boundary set, you're going to start feeling, should I give more leeway because of the kids? Or they're pushing me now to give a little bit of space, or do I want more space? Maybe I should go back to the family a little bit or let the ex in just for this meal. And then you get confused. Maybe you're pulled back to some of the confusion of where you were when you're back being controlled by the family or by the ex. And it's really hard to maintain those boundaries. So I think you have to remember why you had those boundaries in the first place and that it's okay to maintain them. So you have to remember your safety and the safety of your kids, because if you let those boundaries start to slip, it's very hard to get them back.
When you first made a decision to leave your abusive family system, what type of boundaries did you put in place? Either for yourself, did you make a decision like, I'm not going to participate in the family meals, or I'm not going there again for the holidays? Or tell us.
Yeah, it was just done. Well, technically they kicked me out, but also it was on my side too. It's just done. I cannot safely go back. So I didn't contact anybody. I didn't try to navigate and negotiate. It's just, this is done. So with other survivors, it gets a little more confusing. They're trying to maintain a sister. They're trying to maintain relationships with some people in their family. And then they're trying to pull them back to the family. And that gets really confusing because then, well, maybe I should go back for just Christmas. Maybe I can go back for just this party. But then the boundaries are all confused, and then it's hard to pull back again. Because the minute they're back with the abusive member, then they tangle their head back again. And the ground that they have taken to heal, they find that that's gone and they're right back to the start. And then they have to start the healing process all over again. So those boundaries have to be maintained if they want their process forward and healing to be maintained as well. And I suspect it's the same thing with exes, because they can get back and start tangling with our mind, and we don't want that to happen.
Right. Well, and one of the things that I see a lot with divorcing couples is saying, hey, let's get together again for Christmas so that it's less confusing for the children. Or let's get together with the family. It's going to be less confusing. Or why don't I just come over and sleep overnight for Christmas Eve so the kids don't have to split houses? And what I will say about that is I generally don't recommend that type of setup. It's very confusing for the children if you've made a decision, and it's very confusing for you. And it's also likely that something is going to happen that is going to be very uncomfortable, and then you're not going to know how to deal with that situation. So I usually recommend, if you've made a decision that you're going to leave that abusive relationship, you need to set a boundary in place for yourself that you're going to celebrate your holiday on your territory, on your terms, and they are going to celebrate their holiday with their family system, or however they're going to celebrate their holiday. And then you guys are not going to share the holiday together. Okay. And then that's less confusing for the children as well, because if they think that you were separated, they are understanding that you all are separated. Otherwise, they're like, are mom and dad getting back together? What's happening? So that's my recommendation, is to not share the holidays like that. It's just too confusing, and it lends itself to conflict for the kids. And so one of the things I did want to talk about, I know, Lisa, you're not a lawyer. One of the things that I really recommend as an attorney is thinking about the traditions that are important to you and documenting those in a court order. Okay, so when it comes to court orders, especially custody orders, and I don't know if you did this or not, Lisa, but when it comes to custody orders, many women think that I just have to go with the template provisions, the default provisions, whatever the court is just going to do as far as the holidays are concerned. I don't have a choice, or I don't have any say in how the holidays are going to be divided. I guess it's just going to be an alternating. He's going to get one Christmas and I'm going to get the other. That doesn't have to be the case, right? What I usually tell my clients is think about what traditions, what schedule is really important to you. If you always did gifts on Christmas Eve and you really didn't do anything Christmas Day, create a schedule or make a suggestion to the court that you want to have Christmas Eve every year and he's going to have Christmas Day every year. You don't have to alternate. Keep your traditions that are meaningful and important to you, even in abuse situations, and solidify that in a parenting agreement or a court order so that you can maintain that and have that every year. Same thing for Thanksgiving or Easter, all of the holidays, not just Christmas. And think about too, like your travel schedule. If you're prone to travel, you don't want to split the holiday into two, like especially Thanksgiving. You want to have time to be able to get to where you're going and enjoy where you're staying. Usually Christmas is one where you're more likely maybe to split that into two parts. But if you do travel for like Easter or Thanksgiving, that's when you might want to alternate. But do think about your traditions and then create a schedule, a parenting agreement, or custody order around your traditions and what you want to maintain and what's important to you. That's not something you necessarily have to compromise just because you're leaving an abusive relationship. I don't know if you have any input or thoughts on that, Lisa, or if you did anything. I know you talk about your grandsons and all of that, but if you have any life experiences to share along those lines.
Not really anything to add, but I love that you can still maintain what's important to you, even because you feel like you're losing your agency, so that you can have agency even when you feel like you're losing everything. That's important to a survivor. That's
Right.
good.
Yeah, and most women think, they don't have a lot of choices or they don't have a lot of say when it comes to negotiating a court order or a parenting agreement, or even if they go to hearing, right? Let your attorney or let your judge know what you're proposing or what's important to you. And usually what I suggest is to create an outline. So here's my proposed holiday schedule in an outline. I'm going to hand this up to the judge, or I'm going to give this to my attorney to make sure that this is given to the court, so they know what is important to me. When negotiating with an abuser, you need to be careful or mindful that you don't clue them in too much on what's really important to you, because they'll fight for the exact opposite just to control or harm you. But when the rubber meets the road, meaning when it's time to make a final decision or an order is going to be entered, that's when you need to let the judge or your attorney know what really is important to you. So talk about tips for reducing conflict during the holidays. So if you don't have a final order yet, or like an agreement, a separation agreement, or some kind of legal agreement, How important do you think it is, or could it be important to have some agreements in advance before the holidays to help reduce conflict? And what kind of agreements might that be?
I think everything you can have an agreement is better because anything that comes down to a last minute is going to be a conflict that you really don't want around Christmas time.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Lisa.
No, you're good. I just don't like conflicts at all. And when you have an abuser, everything's going to be about conflicts because that's what they live on. That's their fuel.
Yeah. What about, and so like some agreements that you might have, just to give everyone an example, might be what the budget's going to be for the gifts for the children. What the big ticket items might be for the children for their gifts. Abusers use Christmas as an opportunity to really manipulate with gift giving. You know, it could be this is their opportunity to buy that cell phone that they know you don't consent to. Like, you know, you think your kids are too young for this cell phone, or that MacBook, or something tech that you think your children are too young for. And so they use an opportunity, they buy this gift and the children get it for Christmas. And then how do you say, no, I'm sorry, you can't have that, right? It makes you look like the bad guy. So having an agreement in advance, what gifts are we going to buy? What's our budget going to be, so that he's not overspending and over gifting and making you look like the bad parent. So that could be one type of agreement. Another agreement could be, what time are we doing an exchange? You know, who's going to have what part of the holiday, who's going to have the other part. So there's no misunderstanding about how things are going to be handled. And I know it can be hard. Many times we don't want to interact with them, especially once we've left. So we tend to wait and procrastinate to have that contact, to have that conversation. But it is important, I think, to have those agreements and in those conversations. And even if he violates, even if he still doesn't show up when he's supposed to, gives all the big gifts, doesn't stick to his agreement, you can document that to show the court later on if you end up in a custody situation. Look, he's not reliable. Like, he's not credible. He doesn't follow through with what he said he would do. And you can use it in order to help your case long term. So that's what I would say about that. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Lisa.
No, that's good.
Okay. Yeah. And common violations I see during the holidays. This would be whether you have a court order or you have an agreement, but just prepare yourself for this. If you're prepared for it, then when it happens, you don't have to be so upset about it. Like, you can say, okay, I anticipated this. I knew this might happen. It's happening. I can handle this, right? I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to be okay. The common violations that I see at Christmas include refusing to return the children on time, especially if he knows about your plans, right? Don't share too much information with him. Like, don't let him know, hey, we have this big family dinner scheduled at 6:00, or I have reservations at this restaurant at 6:00, right? If he knows definitive details about your schedule, there's a good possibility he's not going to be showing up at 5:30 for that exchange, because he wants to make sure you miss that dinner reservation or that family dinner with your parents in town or whatever else. So canceling exchanges at the last minute. I ran out of gas. My cell phone died. There's a traffic jam. My car broke down, something like that. I hear that a lot. Claiming the children don't want to go. You know, oh, they're having so much fun here. They don't want to come to your house. I hear that a lot. Loopholing the schedule in the court order. Oh, that's not really your time. You know, I'm entitled to additional time. And then just not communicating with you. I see that a lot too. Just ignoring you, or blowing you up, texting and calling nonstop just to interfere with your holiday. So you can't have that. You can't have that piece. What experiences have you had, Lisa, with an abusive family system or an abuser really trying to interfere with peace at the holidays. Are there any particular experiences you've had that you'd like to share?
Yeah, coming in and picking fights, making sure there's no peace, like coming in and putting down everybody that's there in our house, making sure everybody's upset, putting down the food. The food is all wrong. Um, Making sure that that they were someplace they weren't supposed to be with a woman they weren't supposed to be with,
Mhm.
making sure those things are going to blow up at Christmas time.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the holidays that this all comes out. So, that happens. And there's nothing you can do until you kick the person out of the family, but then somebody doesn't want to kick them out of the family. And it's going to happen holiday after holiday.
Yeah. I remember those types of holiday events too, right? Just walking on pins and needles and trying to cover, right?
Mhm.
Try to cover for that person, cover for their behavior, even though everyone could really see what was going on, and just being exhausted by the end of the holiday from just the stress of having to constantly run around. I always feel like a dog chasing my tail.
Yeah.
Like trying to cover for their behavior, and trying to keep them pacified. Like, what can I do for you constantly to keep them happy, to keep things from blowing up? They would blow up, every time, because the holidays are not about them.
Right.
If things are not about them, they need to be the center of attention. They are going to ensure that they are the center of attention. So I want to talk about an area for our viewers who this is really important to them, and especially during the holidays and especially Christmas. So church. So when you can't go back to your church. So when the abusive family system is at the church, maybe your church has become an abusive system, or your abuser either is showing up at your church or goes to the same church, right? You've always gone there as a couple. What do you have any tips or suggestions for our viewers about spiritual abuse, or what do you do when your church is really meaningful to you and you really want to be at church for Christmas Eve? What do you do?
That is a big betrayal, because you should always be safe at a church that you've gone to for a long time. And when they come down on the side of your family or your ex, and many times that's the side they come down on, right? And you're going to be probably look the chaotic one because you're the one that's hurt. And you're not going to be able to go there, because if that church has come down on the side of the abusive person or the abusive family, then you're also experiencing spiritual abuse. So you have to understand that that church is not safe. So either it's time to find a different church, which is going to be awkward because you're not going to feel at home at that church. And at Christmas time, you want to feel at home. And wherever you go, it's going to be everybody else having families, which is going to make you feel more alone and more crazy and more isolated. Or choose to stay home. And I think many times that's the better option.
Mm-hmm.
Stay home and have that time with God alone and focus on the manger scene. And Jesus left, and this is where I was. My first Christmas with my family was gone. Jesus left heaven, where he was at home and he was comfortable and he was fully God there. And he came here to be half God, half man. And he came as a baby in a manger. That had to be really uncomfortable. And so I was feeling uncomfortable. He was uncomfortable. And really thinking through that. And the life he led was uncomfortable. Then I was thinking when he was 12 and when Mary and Joseph couldn't find him and he was in the temple and he said, I've been about my father's business. So he wasn't even thinking about Joseph as being his father. So even there, he wasn't really fitting in. And many times we're not feeling like we're fitting in anywhere. So if we're out of a marriage, we're out of a family, we're feeling so isolated. Jesus felt the same way. And I found a lot of comfort there. So even if we're all alone, we're in good company with Jesus. And Christmas is a good time for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if anybody follows The Chosen, they had the Chosen Christmas movie really resonated with me. There's a scene in which Mary gives birth and they're in the stable and they're surrounded by animals, and they're outside, right? And I don't know what the temperature would have been like in that particular area. Maybe it would have been warm. Maybe it would have been cold, right? It's this desert-like environment, so it's likely to maybe have been cold at that time. But they were surrounded by the stench of the animals, like, because animals don't smell good, when you're in a barn. And there was animal dung and whatnot all around them. Like, he was born just in the lowliest of places. So he has experienced poverty. He's experienced pain. He's experienced oppression. He's experienced what you are going through. And so I think, and I want to get into loneliness too. Like, how do we process, or is it okay during the holidays coming out of abuse to be alone? Right? You're talking about just staying home from church and being alone, spending that time with God. I think understanding that he understands true isolation and loneliness. What would you say to a woman who feels like she's failing or completely alone this holiday season?
There's a lot of women in my community that are completely alone. A lot of them have lost their kids and divorced to full custody to their ex. And I know a lot of you, maybe your ex has the kids over the holidays and either partially alone or completely alone. And it's really, really painful. And I feel for you. And in that aloneness, we can come out in a couple ways. One is, can we sit with ourselves and can we learn to be okay with ourselves? And in that, can we find value in who we are? And can we learn to live just with us and what God is calling us to do? And that's hard. Can we heal enough to go forward with who we are? And that takes sitting alone. And in looking at, hey, everybody else has somebody is a feeling that we have, but it's not true. There's a lot of people that are alone at this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's been a chat that's been going on in my Facebook group. And some of the women who've been alone year after year have gotten to the point where they're saying, I feel neutral about Christmas now. And I've healed this aloneness and I'm okay with it now. Some people sit alone at Christmas and they go to the homeless kitchens and they reach out to other people, and that's how they deal with their aloneness. And some people spend the day in their Bible and take their aloneness to God. And others fight being suicidal. And that's a really tough spot to be as well. And if they do, I would hope you would reach out to somebody, reach out to 988 or whatever you can do, because nobody should have to deal with that. So how you come down on that aloneness, the whole point is to get through it, because December 26th will come and you will get through that. And you are special. God made you. He created you. He gave you a life. And even though it feels impossible to live right now, it God will make a way for you to get through it. This is a low, but there is a way to work through it, and he will help you to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great words. And I think sometimes we have to sit in our aloneness in order to process the pain and to heal.
Yeah.
And that can hurt and that doesn't feel so good, right? But I think it's an important part of the process. What I wanted to say something about that, and it just kind of like went right out of my head. I don't remember what it was. It'll come back to me. I think sometimes we have to be careful about getting stuck there, though, right?
Right.
And I remember what I was going to say about that now. I think we have to also be really mindful of, do we define our identity in other people, right? Is our value in who we are caught up in the acceptance or rejection of other human beings, right? Or is our inherent value in who we are as a person defined by who God says we are, right? And I think when we get caught up in our value as a person is caught up in the identity, the acceptance or rejection of other people, is when we really get caught up in some problems. The other thing I will say is I never experienced loneliness. And I think I will challenge some women to really think about this. I never experienced loneliness like I did when I was in that abusive relationship. Yeah. I might have been present with another person. So there was a human body that was with me, but I never felt so unseen, so unheard, so unvalued than I did while I was in that relationship. So trapped, right? So imprisoned. So when I left, even though I was alone, I could define for myself who I was going to be, how I valued myself, and what I was going to do with my time. Right. And even if I didn't have my children, there were steps I could take to rebuild relationship with them. Even if that meant all I did every year at Christmas was write a letter to them. Even if I didn't send it, start a memoir to my children and save all of those letters. And maybe at the appropriate time in the future, that is something I can give to them. Or maybe it's something I leave to them at a later time, but there are things you can be doing that have meaning, that are valuable. God's not done with you yet. You have so much value and so much purpose. And there's value in community too. Like Lisa said, get out there. There are other women who are hurting. Find your supportive communities, right? Get on Facebook, look for domestic violence organizations, get connected with other women who are going through the same thing. You are not alone. Go to organizations, women's shelters, like with other women who need help. You can be a lifeline to them. And maybe you don't want to be around people. Maybe you really don't like people very much right now. What about like animal shelters? There's so many animals that are mistreated and abused and discarded, that could use someone just to sit and spend time with them, or walk them or whatever. So if people aren't your thing, maybe animals might be. And maybe an animal, you could adopt an animal at Christmas time or the holidays. Maybe that could be your companion. So that's just some suggestions for dealing with loneliness. Any thoughts on any of that, Lisa?
I love those ideas. Yeah. Get outside of your place where you're living and get out into community, because isolation doesn't mean you have to stay inside your four walls. Mm-hmm. So anything that gets you communicating with somebody is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And my motto in my office is tell your story. It will inspire others. right? Your testimony is so powerful, and you can use that this holiday season. Just because it's Christmas doesn't mean you just have to sit and do nothing, right? This may be the year that you start sharing your story. There is another woman that needs to hear that, right? There's connection through our stories, and you may be saving another woman's life by telling your story, right? So you're not defeated. So if there's nothing else that you learned today about surviving holiday abuse or surviving the holidays after abuse, is that you still have so much to give and to offer, right? And it doesn't come in a wallet or a package or anything like that. And I think Lisa would totally agree with me on that.
Oh, absolutely. Every story is so important, and no story is over yet. We have so much living left to do, so let's do it.
Yeah. And I think, Lisa, you survived like systemic abuse, and you went out, you started a podcast, you wrote a book, you're a speaker, an author, you work with women. I mean, tell us all about the things you've done with your story, despite significant loss.
Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming when I think about it, but you just do it one step at a time. And it's because you care about people. So it's like, what can I do with what I have? And how can I help somebody? And somehow you do, and people care about it. And if people can care about my story, which still surprises me, they can definitely care about your story if you're listening today.
Yeah. What about, we're going to get ready to close out here. What about suggestions maybe for some new traditions for women, new holiday traditions for women who are alone?
What is it that is interesting to you? Are you into art? Are you into writing? Are you into music? And what would be impactful to you year after year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then how would it connect to, what would impact Jesus' story? What would it, attach to your life, maybe to your story, and then connect to that.
Right. Yeah. And if you do have community, if you start getting together with other women and a support network, a domestic violence support network, like do a Friendsgiving, a potluck, and get together. That's an idea to do, even at Christmas. Get together, get your PJs on, watch a Christmas movie together, share stories, play games. Things that are free, but just meaningful, that you're spending time together. If you can afford it, travel, go see, experience new things, even if it's local. Find a little town that has a lot of historic charm or something like that may be close by to you, and just go do something with your time. But I agree with you, Lisa, like find things that are really meaningful to you that you've not had the time to actually experience or do, and do those things. If you're introverted, having that downtime, maybe you work all the time, having that downtime might be a blessing. I don't ever get to lay around in my pajamas and just read books. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Well, actually, one of my new traditions that I had after abuse, leaving my abusive ex-husband, I decided that I was going to drive. I did not have my children this year. My ex had them. And I decided I was going to drive to my parents' retirement home, which it was their home that they built to retire in, not their retirement home, like a nursing home. And it's on the lake. And so it's beautiful. It's this big, beautiful home, waterfront. And they were gone. They were visiting my brother, and I was going to be the only one there. And I was going to go with a blanket and a big fire and go up there and read and just be by myself. So I drove up there, got up there, and realized like I am alone. And it was the most alone I ever felt. So the next day, packed up all my stuff, went back to the city. I was like, I can't be here. I'm just too alone. Got my pajamas on and my blanket and started watching Hallmark Christmas movies. And that's where I fell in love with Hallmark Christmas movies. And even though I cried the entire time I was watching them because of all these sappy love stories that are not based in reality, I still love them. And that's one of my favorite traditions today is I watch Hallmark Christmas movies all holiday long. So anyway, that's one of my memories. And my new traditions is Hallmark Christmas.
That's
I don't
fun.
know if you have a new holiday memory, and then I'll close us out. Something you do other than the 12 days of Christmas with your grandkids that you can think of.
I enjoy watching Christmas in Connecticut. I enjoy that every year. It's so funny.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have that as a tradition that they don't think about, like a particular movie, right? Or going to see a particular play, you know, the Nutcracker at the community theater, or the Christmas Story or Christmas Carol, something like that. So that's something
Yeah.
to make a new tradition, right? Baking
Yep.
cookies can be cheap. You can do that. So we would just really encourage you. If you hear nothing else today, hear this. You know, you are not failing. You are not behind. Surviving the holidays after abuse is an act of courage, and creating new traditions is an act of hope. We thank you so much for being here. We thank you for choosing peace over performance. And we truly do hope that you have a peaceful holiday. Please be sure to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and share this video with another woman who needs to hear it. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing of yourself, sharing your heart, and sharing your experiences with us today, and also working with the women that you do. We really appreciate you, and we appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. Loved it.
Thank you. And peace to everyone out there. May you have a blessed holiday season.